McKeon of the Irish Independent joins us to have a look ahead to some of the GA for the weekend. Conor, good morning to you.
Morning, man.
Owen's just been putting forward there. Cork could be the second best team in Leinster in the football championship. Are you having that?
It'd be close with Meath. I think Meath have probably made big strides in the last couple of years in terms of their, even in terms of their physicality and stuff like that. Like Meath are going to Wicklow at the weekend, and the old cliche about Auckland being a hard place to go is true on many, many levels. And in normal years, I'd nearly see them kind of having a bit of a bother, but I just think Meath have gone to a different level now. So Cork be the second best team in Leinster. It'll be close with Meath. It will be close with Meath, but I can see where you're coming from, all right?
It's like the Cork that have gone as opposed to the Cork that we think might be coming with this brand new bunch of young fellas that are in there, and the possibility that they might actually be able to give Kerry a good run at some point down the track. The Westmeath game tomorrow night in Portlaoise, the overall context here is that the reality is if there are any flaws in that in this Dublin armour, and there might be, we're not going to get them see them exposed too much tomorrow evening. In that context, what are you looking out for tomorrow?
Well, I think the last time I was on with the lads, we sort of predicted maybe that because of the lockdown and because Desi Farrell was so late to be appointed as Dublin manager, like it was last December, and by the time the shutdown happened, he'd had very little engagement time with the squad. And I think the big worry was always going to be that Desi Farrell went into this championship without really having put his own stamp on the team. And that's not to say that it was necessary to change it up in any significant way. But I think every manager, wants to have control over everything their team does. But I think what we predicted was, and the league selections in the two games they played since then would back this up, is that the team is going to be very, very similar to last year's team, to the team of the last 2 years. And that any sort of players from the outside that Desi wanted to bring in probably wouldn't have enough of an opportunity in terms of games and in terms of training time to really push those players out. So I suppose what I'm expecting is really a team that's very, very similar to the team that won 5 in a row. Like Jack McCaffrey is the very obvious absentee from that. But otherwise, I can't imagine that it's going to be massively different. Like, I don't think anybody really has come through to take the second midfield spot alongside Brian Fenton. So I think that's where James McCarthy would be. Paul Mannion didn't play in the last 2 games of the league, but I believe he's back training. So they could, theoretically at least, field the same starting 6 forwards that they played in the last 2 All-Ireland finals, 3 if you want to include the replay. Although I'd say there's a fair chance that Paddy Small will keep his place in the corner. And then in defence, I think they were probably just down 1 or 2 bodies. So, I mean, Robbie McDade could possibly come in there. He might be new to some people, but he's been around the scene for quite a while. He's been in and out of the Dublin panels for the last while. So, yeah, like of the players that have come through, you're looking at Sean Bugler and Paddy Small, but they were coming through anyway. So, like, it hasn't been... there hasn't been a whole pile of change to this point. And I think that's probably due to the fact that it's been, a very limited exposure to inter-county management for Desi Farrell. And there's another point as well that somebody made the other day, is that, in times gone by, when Dublin were building up for an All-Ireland semi-final, like all teams, you might have 3 weeks of preparation, which means you have a week to analyse the opposition, a week to sort of properly hone your game plan, maybe a training weekend away. But now you've none of that time. You're talking about preparing for an All-Ireland semi-final of 2 or 3 training sessions, which is a very limited amount of time. So, the next best thing from having a lot of preparation time for those matches is having a group of players that have come through everything collectively in terms of, what teams can throw at them tactically over the years. So I think it's only natural now that Desi Farrell has kind of arrived at a team that's very similar to the one that's been around for the last few years.
Is your opinion that the 2 games we've seen since the resumption under Desi Farrell are a little bit off what we would have expected, even when Dublin weren't shooting the lights out in the league under Jim Gavin?
Yeah, possibly. But I was at the Meath game, and they just, it was one of those situations where, like Dublin in a lot of league games end up winning games that they don't look like they're going to win for a large part of it, just because, and this is what I'm talking about, going back to the tried and tested players. Players who just have this kind of high-level in-game intelligence and know when to surge and know when to back off and know how to win games. Like in that match, you couldn't say that any of the big players had massive games for Dublin, and yet it was Conor O'Callaghan and Kieran Kilkenny and Brian Fenton, who kind of went and won the game for them. And it was pretty similar against Galway. Like those conditions down in Galway, very, they pose a lot of sort of, you have to play different in the first half to the second half. That's the basic tactical difference. But again, that group of players is just so well drilled now at this stage as to what you're supposed to do in those different situations. So, I keep arriving back to this point, but it's undeniable that when you have a group of players that's been so through so much over the past few years and has been through so much successfully, I think it's impossible not to kind of keep with them and stick with them and pick them and put your faith in them, because those players that I mentioned, some of them are only 25, 26. They're only hitting their peak now. So that's the backbone of the latter years of the Jim Gavin reign for the 5 in a row, and I think these would be the players that kind of lead Desi Farrell's team over the next few years as well.
Because it is such a player-led environment, you can't read too much into the managerial change when that amount of players have built up that amount of information about how to win big games. So the question is, the likes of your Robbie McDades and your Paddy Smalls, from being around the panel and not necessarily being involved in the white heat of an All-Ireland final replay, for example, do they have that information? Are they ready to eke out a massive game? Would they have got it just by being around the camp?
Yeah, I think so. It's one of the most overused words now that we always sort of throw out when we're talking about high-performing teams. But it is what it is. It's a culture, you only had to read Bernard Brogan's book to get a sense of how there's this constant kind of culture of collective improvement that goes on in that group. So, I don't think you can be there for any significant length of time and not have picked it up. You look at a guy like Eric Lowndes, who's been there since about 2012, 2013, and he mightn't have started too many championship games, but I think by virtue of just being in that panel, and being part of that system and everything else, if he was in a situation where he had to start every game in the championship, if Niall Scully or Brian Howard was injured, I don't think they would bat an eyelid. So, I think it was always going to be difficult for Dessie to go in and start like wagging, not that he would, but for any manager to go in and start wagging his finger and tell fellas, look, throw your medals in the bin there, guys. We've a new season here. I think a smart manager, and Dessie strikes me as a smart manager, will kind of harness what's already in the squad there and then maybe seek to grow it a small bit. I think, as I said, his potential for growth has been incredibly limited this year, and I think next year we'll probably see a bit more of it. I think Dublin will be more interesting to watching their evolution next year than they will be this year. But for this year, it's just absolutely inevitable that the team that goes out at the weekend looks very familiar to us all.
Yeah, it'd be hard to see him going in and doing a Brian Clough. We want to win it, but we want to win it better. Particularly where that the benchmark that Dublin team have set. Like on that overall point, Conor, about winning it or about how they win it. Like looking at the stuff last weekend. Now, last weekend will probably end up being the worst weekend in terms of conditions that we'll see over the course of the championship. Yeah, hopefully, yeah. And at the same time, it was blatantly obvious that we're not. If people need a reminding, we're not in the middle of summer, and games are going to look different than they would normally do, and the ways to win games are going to be different than they were. How much of a leveler is all that going to be when you factor it in for that Dublin team in terms of this like style of play that they normally find their groove at come sort of June, July, and the accuracy of passing, the finesse that they play with in perfect conditions? How much of a leveler, even without sort of Storm Brendan or whatever it was, is that going to be?
Yeah, like it's a fair question. I suppose there's two factors really to take into account. The first one is that I think none of us really expect Dublin to come into any great difficulty until they get to Croke Park. And I think in Croke Park, because of the way the stadium is built and how well kept the pitch is, those conditions aren't quite as pronounced. That's just that's just the way it is in that stadium.
The ground might be a bit slippier, or the ball might be a bit slippier, but beyond that, not much.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is I think the whole, the weather is a great leveler thing is maybe sort of overblown in some respects, because, when the ball is slippy and the wind is really, really high, the basic skills, the execution of hand passes, the execution of short-range kick passes very accurately, they become more valuable skills again. And I think the team that has the highest level of those skills actually benefits. Their advantage maybe gets that little bit further. Now, what we're going to see, and we see it generally anyway, is a much more possession-based game of Gaelic football. If the wind is howling on Croke Park on All-Ireland final day, Kerry or Dublin or Mayo or whoever it is won't be kicking 40, 50-yard balls into their inside forward line. They just won't, So I think what we're going to see is a much more possession-based game of Gaelic football. Teams running the ball out from the back. But look, that's what we've kind of become used to over the last few years. I think possession is kind of king. Teams just don't take chances when they have the ball, and I think in those circumstances that you outlined, they'll be less inclined to take chances. So, I think we'll see a much more cautious game where teams don't really, again, like shooting is going to be another one as well. If you can get an inside mark now and you can line it up properly like a free, that's going to be invaluable. So I think a lot more teams are going to take marks and attacking marks than we initially anticipated. If you remember, at the start of the league, there was players winning marks inside and just not taking them because they either they weren't programmed to do so or they just felt it wasn't in any way advantageous. But I think given, if there is a high wind, if you can kick a 40-yard ball to a guy and he catches it, they're all going to call it. So I think that's going to be a big skill. And, a little bit like the Raymond Gallagher's point in the Monaghan-Cavan game last week, I can see a big game, an All-Ireland semi-final or maybe an All-Ireland final being hinging on somebody taking a mark from 40 yards in an empty stadium, which is not a sentence I ever saw myself saying.
Yeah, not exactly an amazing way to see it being won either. Just on the hurling then, Conor, Dublin against Cork this weekend. Am I getting overexcited here and thinking that this has potential to be an absolute classic? Just mainly because everybody expected Cork to put in a far better performance last weekend, and then the Dublin performance was crazy. The comeback against Kilkenny was exceptional. I don't think that actually got the airtime it deserved because the full game wasn't available free to air in Ireland. But it was a ridiculous second half performance from Dublin. Can you even start to predict how this game might go?
Well, that's exactly the point, Owen, because I saw a couple of people who have tipped Dublin to win this game, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with them. What I disagree with is anybody thinking that they could predict what Dublin are going to do on Saturday in Thurles with any great degree of accuracy. You're talking about a team that went 16 points down to Kilkenny. That's a shocking situation to find yourself in for a modern Dublin hurling team. And of all the teams in Ireland, Dublin are the team that most regularly suffer at Kilkenny's hands. And the notion of coming back from there is completely outlandish. I think on Monday I started sort of flicking through record books just to see whether there had ever been in Championship hurling a 16-point comeback where a team actually went and won it. And I couldn't get anywhere near it, to be honest.
Right.
You're talking about a team that produced the absolute worst, showed the worst side of their game possible, and then possibly produced the best 25 minutes of hurling in the history of Dublin hurling. So it depends on what you mean by form,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it might come down to management. I've never been in an inter-county dressing room like that, but the potential to harness the good parts of that and sort of take the learnings of whatever cliche from the bad parts of it, that was definitely there. So I think if the big leaders on the team and the management sort of harnessed that on Sunday night, they made sure that when the players showed up on their recovery session the next morning, they were already sort of focused on the next game and they were already taking a lot from what they did to come back against Kelly. Because you're right on, Kilkenny couldn't win a ball. I was watching on the streaming service as well, and at the water break, Brian Cody was giving his players a bit of a hard time. He was barking away at them. But at that stage, Dublin were still, I'd say, 11 points behind. And Marty Morrissey and Anthony Daly were having a bit of a laugh. They were saying, oh, geez, there's Cody, and look at him barking away. And there wasn't even a hint that Dublin were going to be able to come back. And to get it back level was extraordinary. And not to finish it off as a bit of a sickener, but it's hard to overestimate how much superior to Kilkenny Dublin were in that period. Kilkenny couldn't get their hands on the ball. They just could not get their hands on the ball. So there's definitely something there in this Dublin hurling team. And I would imagine that if you're the manager, it's a much better situation to be in than if you were Kieran Kingston on Monday morning, because Cork barely, you had to sort of check Cork for a pulse after that game down in Thurles against Waterford. They weren't just beaten, they were heavily, heavily beaten. Some of their forwards did not perform. They looked tactically naive, but I think that really came down to the execution of what they were trying to do, because there's no way that a management team of Kieran Kingston and Gerard Cunningham set up a team to rain ball down on Tadhg de Burka all afternoon in Thurles. They knew where he was going to stand. They knew what he was going to try to do. So Cork were incredibly flat, and I think they're under a bit of pressure. Well, they definitely are under a bit of pressure going into this game. So that's a very roundabout way of ticking all the boxes and telling you I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. Like I wouldn't. It's one of those games. Like Dublin could do absolutely anything in this game, and I mean that sort of in a positive as much as a sort of pejorative prediction. And with Cork, you know, they're one of the greatest forwards of all time inside, and you know the setup of a very, very sturdy defence and a very exciting attack. Like if Alan Cadigan catches form, he can absolutely incinerate you, but he didn't the last day, and the same goes for Conor McKeon. So, you know, it's going to be very, very interesting. It's going to be interesting. An interesting aspect to it, I think, is Ger Cunningham there, who, you know, he's back as Cork with a coach and still highly regarded. You know, he had 3 years with Dublin. You know, he knows the vast majority of those players, and I think he probably masterminded Cork's victory over Dublin in the 2013 All-Ireland semi-final. So the last time Dublin played Cork in the championship, Ger was Dublin manager and Kieran Kingston was in his first stint as Cork manager. So there'll be a lot of kind of shared knowledge of the various different players that are involved there. And Matty Kenny is one of these managers who you know, he thinks very, very deeply about the game. I think they were probably caught up in their matchups the last day. You know, they wanted Owen O'Donnell and Colin Fennelly, but they didn't bank for Colin Fennelly not playing. So, like, he dragged Owen O'Donnell away from goal, and you were left with a situation where TJ Reid was one-on-one with James Madden on the edge of the square. So, you know, there was a tactical sort of situation that Dublin had to address. And they were in a mad situation where they brought back a player when they went 8 points down. And you might see that as kind of a negative step. You've gone 8 points down and all of a sudden you're playing with an extra defender. But, you know, you can't attack if you don't have the ball. And bringing an extra player back meant that Dublin can take a short puck out and work the ball up the pitch. So it will just be really interesting to see what they do tactically against Cork and vice versa.
Yeah, that 4-point hammering was one report that I read about the Cork Waterford game last weekend. So we'll see. In a word, which way are you going?
Oh, Jesus. I mean, I'd probably still go for Cork, you know, just because the game is in Thurles and they have, you know, more experience of winning these games. I don't think, you know, the Dublin draw is one. That's not a word. I know that's many words. But yeah, I'd probably just go with Cork when I start to talk myself around it here.
We'll take that. Conor, pleasure. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads.